Okay, so I will begin, and if somebody else is coming along, then we'll just let them in. Good evening and namaste again. It's nice. I really like when I do consecutive days because it's really nice to share the energy field and see the same faces and know that we are in this process together. Whereas if we do like one class here and then maybe another class somewhere else, there's something really magical about the continuity, I feel, and we still have another day to go. So I'm very grateful for the internet for allowing us a space to get together. And with that, I also want to apologize for this morning. If you tried to log in into the morning class, there was an internet connection problem. So I've recorded the class and I'm uploading it so you can do it whenever you have time. And tomorrow morning, hopefully, the connection will be good if you want to come along at 8 a.m. I want to start with a meditation so that we get in the zone. So go ahead and find a comfortable seat. Allow your back to be straight and do any movements that you may find necessary in order to feel comfortable. So you can roll your shoulders up and back, open your chest, whatever you might need to do in order to feel very comfortable. And again, if that may mean that you want to shut down your camera so that you feel more comfortable, there's no requirement to having it on. So finding any movements that your body wants to do. Maybe you want to stretch up towards the sky, reach up with your hands, whatever movements might allow you to get into a very comfortable state. You can go ahead and do some twists if that would feel right. And what we will all do is when you feel ready, allow your hands to rest wherever they might land. And take your nose to the right side. And imagine that your nose was like the face of an owl and you could turn your head all the way back. So very gentle, mindful movement. Keep following that trace of the nose. Let your shoulders relax. Exhale here. Exhale fully. Empty out your lungs. And on the in-breath, bring your nose to center. Very gently, very mindfully. Bring your nose to center. That's it. And when you find your spine, your spinal cord is at center, then take your nose to the opposite side. Follow your nose. And the eyes can be open or closed. The eyes can follow your nose if that feels good. Or you can also have your eyes shut. And when you get to that point where you can't move anymore, empty out your lungs. Exhale fully. And on the next in-breath, bring the nose to center. And again, eyes can follow or eyes can be shut. And when your nose gets to center, then bring it to the opposite side. Letting your eyes either follow or be shut. And when your nose gets to the right, notice if your chin is a bit close to your right shoulder. And if it is, slide that shoulder away from you as if the shoulder was melting down towards the earth. And bring the nose to center, very gentle, very mindful movement. And then to the opposite side, no rush. And when your chin gets to the left side, notice if your left shoulder feels close to the chin and slide it down as if it was melting down towards the earth. And this time, bring your chin towards the left shoulder So what I want you to focus on is on straightening the right side of the neck. And I want you to let your belly be soft, like those soft Buddha bellies we were practicing yesterday. And then bring your chin towards the center of your chest. And now breathe into the back of your neck. And I want you to imagine the tissues in between your shoulder blades softening. Imagine that prana can flow to all those places it usually can't because we're stressed. And instead of feeling the cortisol of stress, feel the lightness of being, of this gift of being present today, this evening, just right now. Bring the chin very gently to the right side, opening the left side of your neck. And take deep breaths as if the breath could help you open space in the left side of the neck. Let the chin come back to center one more time. And very, very slow, very gently, reach up your chin. And imagine that you're holding a tennis ball in between your chin and your chest. So you're holding a tennis ball here. And I want you to do whatever movement might feel good for the neck right now. It might be just keeping it in stillness, maybe doing some like stretches, maybe taking the chin up, whatever movement might feel good for the neck. And let this find completion. There's no need to rush to get to anywhere, just making any final movements that allow you to feel complete with your neck. And bring both hands together towards your chest and rub your palms together, generating heat as if we were lighting a fire with our hands. And bring the palms of your hands back to your occipital, so that ridge that we have from the spinal cord to the brain, and let the fingers massage however it might feel good. So sometimes we need a lot of pressure. Sometimes it's just that gentle holding. So find what is it that you need and do it. Let your fingers go to where you need them to go. Making sure that wherever you're pressing, you can exhale deeply so that we can signal the nervous system that it's okay to let go. Become very, very mindful of your breath. And when you feel like it is complete, allow your hands to come down one more time, letting your hands rest. You can close your eyes if that feels interesting to you. And notice the flow of the in-breath, how it enters through your nostrils and it travels to all these different areas in your body. The rise and the fall. Notice, where does the in-breath feel more poignant? Notice if you rush to exhale, if there's a rush to exhale, or if you can allow for the breath to be complete. Notice what is happening. Where is the breath more present? And then notice the out breath. The exhale. The letting go. The emptying out. Notice that we are not trying to adjust the breath, make it longer or make it shorter. We're not counting breaths. We're just simply noticing. And this capacity to notice our breath is called anapanasati. Simply noticing the flow of the in-breath as it is, and the out-breath, each in their own rhythm. And begin to explore if with the out-breath there can be a softening not only of the breath, but also of tension that we may have accumulated throughout the day. And pick a spot, like maybe it's your forehead, or your cheekbones, or your jaw. Maybe it's your neck. Take your awareness to that place where you feel like, okay, there's certainly tension here. And imagine that with the out-breath, there can be also a softening of those muscles, of those tissues, of the fascia, where before we were holding, the exhale invites for a letting go. If you think that it might be helpful to bring your hands to that area where you find tension, you can do so. For instance, if you feel like there's tension in your jaw, you can bring your fingers to your jaw and hold and see if there can be an invitation for a letting go. Not forcing, not pressuring, just having that sense of it's okay to soften. Asking the body if it's okay to let go. Keep focusing on the exhale as that open space. With each in-breath, settling into that space, and with the out-breath, letting go, releasing, softening. Knowing that you can move your fingers, move your hands to wherever you might want them to go. Letting the in-breath invite the spine to lengthen, the out-breath to soften. And as we practice this observation of the breath, pay attention to the physical body. We will be now reviewing our koshas. So pay attention to the physical body. Like we did yesterday, I want you to pay attention to your digestive system and notice what's happening. You might find that it's an entirely different rhythm. Letting the breathing, that mindful breathing, let the belly, allow for the belly to soften, to let go of tension. See if you can notice the heartbeat, your own heartbeat, and how it's pumping blood to the entire organism. Noticing the skin, our largest organ, and how it is in contact with space. The clothes that you are wearing, the air that is around you. Noticing your body in space. And notice the energetics of this space. So usually when we create a space for meditation, the environment changes. Notice your own inner energetics. How does meditation help you self-regulate? What's the condition of your inner environment? What is the quality of energy that you have available right now? How is it shifting? Where is it taking you? And pay attention to the plethora of experiences that could be available energetically. And moving deeper into the energetics of the mind, the logics of the mind. Mind as our nervous system, the mind as our thoughts. And again, just as I explained yesterday, imagine that you could take a temperature. If you could take a thermometer and measure the temperature of your mind. Warm temperatures is a lot of thoughts. Cooler temperatures is less activity. And yet it's just a temperature, right? Noticing where your mind is at. And using this opportunity as we rest and repair to generate tonic thoughts so that we can create tonic chemicals in our body. Beyond language, how does it feel to generate tonic chemicals? Expanded, high vibrational, loving, compassionate, light-filled, joyful chemicals. At the core of every thought, there is love. There is either a call for love or an expression of love. Even those lower vibrational thoughts are calls for love. So inherently, in essence, it continues to be love. And moving even deeper into the awareness that can notice all of these experiences. The wisdom body, that which recognizes love as the essence, light as the essence. Notice if it's easy to remain and abide in that state of witness consciousness, closer to pure awareness. Or if it's easier to engage with the mental chatter. Notice where you gravitate towards. I want you to focus in that yearning of the heart, that desire of the heart to want to remain in the light, to want to remain in pure awareness. That yearning of your heart to want to connect to what is real. Yearnings of the heart that want love, that want light, that want truth. Cherish that thirst, that yearning for love. So precious. That is the soul of our minds. And without losing touch with the soul of the mind, the soul of the heart, without losing touch because we think that it is only available in a particular moment. Noticing that even though the meditation may close, that yearning is still there. That curiosity, that desire for truth is still there. And to bring closure, allow yourself to take 2 very deep in-breaths, followed by 2 very deep out-breaths. In the in-breath, we let the belly expand, the lungs expand, sensing that depth of breath. And in the out-breath, there's a softening and a letting go, continuous. And when this feels complete to you, you can open your eyes and we can meet in this space again. Welcome. Take a moment to write 2 words that you associate from this meditation. It doesn't have to be the book of your life, just 2 words. And if you feel called to write those words on the chat, you can go ahead and do so. Beautiful. It's okay to let go. It is okay to let go. It's okay to let go. For me, I will share, I noticed that there's this vast field of presence and there's mental chatter happening. So presence, chatter, presence, chatter. And there was somehow like criticism for the chatter, which is really just chatter. And so I felt this like, there's hope in just being in the presence. And all of a sudden, when I could just sit with that, there was this wave of forgiveness for the attack, if that makes sense. The attack that it's not perfect, or the attack that there's still chatter going on. So those are my 2 words. Maria, calm. Andrea, peace. Beautiful. Okay, I'm glad that it could serve that experience. So before I go into our slides, we can continue where we left off yesterday. And I know Fanny wasn't there yesterday, so I hope that you can catch up, because yesterday is a very important foundational module for what we will review today. So if you find that today is a little bit like overwhelming, or you find lost, yourself kind of lost with the material, then go to yesterday's class and review it. So before we go into the slides, I want to read this poem from Pedro Arrupe, which was actually the inspiration for the meditation that I guided you. And you may recall in the meditation I said everything in essence is love. You know, sometimes we feel like there might be hatred, or there might be judgment, but in reality, it is either an expression of love or a call for love. Does that make sense to you? Like when we get angry, it's because we're not feeling seen or recognized, and it really is a call for love. Or when somebody does something that in our eyes is totally disconnected from reality, it is a call for love. And again, it doesn't mean that it's good, that it's justifiable. It's just, it is a call for love in essence, in our own human hearts. So Pedro Arrupe says, nothing is more practical than finding God. Nothing is more practical than finding God. That is, than falling in a love. In a quite absolute final way, what you are in love with, what you love to do, what seizes your imagination will affect everything. In a quite absolute final way, so everything that we love, that we cherish, that which captivates us, that seizes our imagination will affect everything. It will decide what you will get. It will decide what will get you out of bed in the mornings, what you will do with your evenings, how you spend your weekends, what you read, who you know, what breaks your heart, and what amazes you with joy and gratitude. Fall in love, stay in love, and it will decide everything. So let's take another moment After listening to this, write down, what do you love? What are you in love with? And do you follow that love affair? And if you don't follow that love, would you like to? So we left off yesterday. We said goodnight with our goodnight story of the farmer and the horse, with this idea that sometimes in our eyes or in the other on the other sides, something is good luck or something is bad luck. Something is good fortune, something is an attack from God or an attack from the other. And this capacity of the farmer to stay with it and to not make a judgment of what is happening. And as I was reflecting on this story yesterday when we said goodnight, I spoke a lot about the farmer and his capacity to be non-judgmental, but I didn't speak about the Tao, and I didn't speak about that which creates those situations. And it amazed me because I was like, oh, I spoke about level one, which is our attitude to life. But then I didn't speak about life. And that just created so much love in my heart because in reality, we think that we're the ones who are perceiving situations, and we are, but what are those situations? Is it this external force, or is it our own creator? And I find this kind of beyond language. It's difficult to articulate in a way that it makes sense. So if we take this example, the farmer gracefully says, who knows? Maybe it's good luck, maybe it's bad luck. I don't know. It's just what is. And what is it? What is? That's my question. What is it that is? What is it that created the horse, and then the horse broke its leg, and then the other horse came, and then the farm was thriving, and then the son broke his leg, and then the army came? Who is it that is orchestrating all of these events? Because on the one hand, we can focus on our attitude towards them, and that's wonderful. That's the path of self-development. I'm very interested in what is it that's creating all of this anyway? And could it be that there's a good intention or a bad intention? And God, when we conceive of as this force behind it all, is inherently good, and for our human limited minds is hard to grapple with that when there's so much suffering happening in the world, in our lives. And so this question, what is it that is? And could it really be love? And I choose to believe that it is. And so turning into the structuring layers of the self, what was supposed to be yesterday's mod. These layers I've called the layers of perception that structure our being. I chose this image. It's from Hilma Klint, if you're familiar with her art. If you're not, it's beautiful artwork. And I chose this image because it is this structural circle within circle, very differentiated colors. And then towards the center, you have the silver lining, this thread that connects it all. And if you bear for one moment, I'm going to bring our whiteboard. The official whiteboard is still in Osara, but I promise for another workshop I will have the official whiteboard. How this works. And so yesterday our conversation was around how when we're very little, we make this decision to separate our minds into what it's okay to know and what it's better if we don't know, right? And I spoke about Sataribu, how it's called in Sanskrit, the split mind. And this is the beginning of how we, well, it's prior to that, but this is the first layer that structures our being, this decision. It's the first one because it literally splits our mind. So the sensor is how we are calling that split. So remember, there was the mind, separate being, and the sensor comes in and says, there's some things that I am okay with knowing. I'm gonna do this. There are some things that it's okay that I know, but there are other things that it's better if I don't know. And this sensor, it really is called sensor because it censors information. It is like this entity sounds weird. It is this agency of our minds that is protecting us. It's designed to protect us. So when something feels overwhelming, or when something feels like we don't know really how to deal with it, the sensor, that agency of the mind, comes to protect us from that which seems overwhelming. And so this is very useful when we're growing into our early years, because it literally is a second mom when mom is not there, because it can soothe us back into that state of equanimity. So when we are little, let's say a sound is too harsh, or adults are fighting and we can't really understand it, or somebody says something with a tone of voice, or there's stress in the room, or whatever this it can be even situations out of our control, like we're driving and the car is being driven by our parents and there's a car accident, or this situations where we really don't know if it's safe or not, and we need to make sure that we are okay. And so we push information away. And this capacity to censor is based in such tenderness, because we really want to feel safe, right? What happens is that as we begin to grow, the censor doesn't necessarily grow along with us. So we may get more capable of dealing with life and the obstacles and the situations that happen, but those things that we censored when we were very little are still there. So we may be older in our physical body, but in our minds, those things that still trigger us, that are being held captive by the censor, continue to be overwhelming. And so this is a module for adults. This is not a module for children, because children need a censor, but adults don't necessarily need a censor. Censor can be useful as an ally, but not as an inhibitor. This will make more sense soon. I will give more examples. I just want to lay out the structure. The second layer that structures our being is the intrauterine subconscious. You can see it like this. The intrauterine subconscious is very interesting because it is beyond language. Actually, it is before language. So we develop this structure when we are in our mother's womb. We all come from a mother who held us in her body, and her body was our body for a long period of our development. And so this is preverbal because we are a being within another being, and we don't know how language functions. All we know is that we feel, right? We feel her heartbeat. When she gets stressed, we feel that. When she gets happy and excited, we feel that. When she feels peace, we receive that. It is this totally symbiotic, enmeshed state. What she eats, we eat. What she drinks, we drink. Mother and child are literally one, and we have all been at a stage where we are totally intrinsic to our mom. And so this layer that structures us is beneath the sensor, because we can't really make sense of it with language. It is energetic. And I want you to take a moment to see if that makes sense to you. It is energetic because everything that she was feeling was getting transferred to you, right? And so later in life, when I want to explain this, okay, fantasies that take form in the womb of the mother remain in our awareness. So fantasies is these ideas, these perceptions that she had about us, whether it be like she's going to be this wonderful daughter, to how am I going to be able to sustain this child, that spectrum of what motherhood can be, right? And all of that energetically sweeps into our awareness. And sometimes to the point that we're really structured by it later in adulthood. I'll get into that more soon with examples. I wrote here the desire to get back into the womb and disappear. So many of us later in life, when life becomes overwhelming in different moments, we turn to habits that will bring us back to that feeling of being back in the womb. So drinking too much and obliterating consciousness, we literally disappear as a separate entity, and we feel like we have no responsibility. We just want to be fed and taken care of, not even to be fed, because it was happening all through the birth, through the umbilical cord, right? So many times when life feels overwhelming, you want to get back into the womb. I'll explain this more with examples soon. I just want to structure this. The personal subconscious is this third layer. The colors don't necessarily represent anything. I'm just grabbing pens along. So the personal subconscious is where most of us will be able to do this work in this retreat, because it's very obvious to us. The personal subconscious is very unique, and it's completely unique to each being, depending on how we were raised. So for example, when I do this, when I've done this workshop with my brother, we were born in the same household, same house, same parents, but we have totally different personal subconscious because of the time that we were born and what was happening in our family system and in our family unit. So even though we may have gotten the same amount of food, we each have had our rooms, we each had, there wasn't necessarily a preference in clear, in the clear stage. Even if everything was divided with a cup, you get an ounce of milk, you get an ounce of milk. the way that we are being perceived and how we feel like we are being perceived in our family unit is very circumstantial. And one thing that I'm very interested in is this interference pattern. This is a concept that is borrowed from quantum physics. Interference patterns, things get mixed. So you have a masculine figure. It can be your biological dad, but it can also be a caretaker, a grandfather, an uncle, that masculine figure, whoever played that role. And then there's a feminine figure, mother, biological mother, or adoptive mother, or aunt or grandmother. And there's these two figures that are creating an idea of who you are. So the idea that this masculine figure has of us and this feminine figure has of us, they interact and then we receive it. And when we receive it, we are not passive blank slates. We interpret it. Oh, okay, you want me to do this. Oh, okay, you're smiling when I do this. Maybe I'll do it. Or, okay, you're getting upset about this. This may mean that I shouldn't do this. The way that we're interpreting what is happening and how what projections are coming into us. And so a projection in psychoanalytic terms is that message that comes from the other. So the other projects into me something. It can be like, oh, you're great, you're great in writing. You're doing excellent in writing. So there is this observation, which then the projection is, I must be smart, I must be intelligent. And the identification is my choice of how I want to relate to this projection. So yes, I accept this, or no, I don't accept this. Yes, I'll be this perfect little girl, or no, I will rebel. But either way, whatever our choice is in how we relate to these projections is in relationship to that projection. So it will always, as a child, later in adulthood, we have the power to change. But as a child, it's either yes, mommy, or no, mommy. And you see this is quite beautiful in children, how there is this like total like elation and like, yes, I want to do this because it makes you happy, and if you're happy, I'm happy. Or there's this like, no, nope, I'm not going to do it. But it's still in relation to that, right? And so this personal subconscious grows nucleus by nucleus. So we have our nuclear family system, which is that place where we grew up, and those people that were critical for our development. And again, it's not always a mother and a father. It can be any caretaker that we had, that we looked upon, and they were supposed to be reliable. And then we have our extended family system. So that this can be like uncles, aunts, cousins, neighbors, people that are not in our day-to-day, but they're also a part of it. And they play a role too, because they perceive us in a particular way. So with these presentations, I usually give my own examples because then it's easy for people to relate. So let's say I am upset. Something happened that triggered me, and I am sad and I am upset, and so I'm crying. I'm 5 years old, let's say. And my uncles come for lunch, for a family lunch at my house. And I'm crying, and so they say like, why are you crying? There's no reason to cry. Look at you. You look so ugly when you cry. And they say this trying to be funny, and they're probably drinking a beer, and like, who's the funnier uncle in the family system. And it's they don't mean it as a judgment or anything, but the way that the child takes this is like, what does this mean about me? And usually in family situations, there's not that full presence, right? People are on their phones, people, well, nowadays, but people, the child, the support that the child needs is not always there. And then we have the kindergarten system, which is everything that we experience when we're not in our homes, right? So And right now, I think this will be very interesting with all the virtual classes and how children are being brought up in this new world order. But when we went to kindergarten, whatever that system was, there were other beings there who were our same age, and they had totally different lives than us. I mean, it was so interesting to go to a classmate's house and see how different things were, right? And there's one example that really caught my attention here, because again, this is subconscious. We have an idea of what this was, and then there's things that we chose not to remember. So we keep some good memories, we repress others. And I was watching this documentary that I mentioned yesterday, the Heal documentary, and there's this woman who, she always lived a very healthy life, and she develops cancer, stage 4, which is very uncommon to live from stage 4 cancer. And she, aside from her chemotherapy, she begins to work with a spiritual psychologist. And there is this one instance which she recalls that all of her, in her school, she was a little girl, and in her school, they ask people, all the students, to bring something to eat. And so some kids bring this very elaborate desserts, brownies, and other kids bring elaborate things. And she brings this like very simple cracker snack. It was so simple that I can't even remember what she brought, but it was like galleta soa or something. And so all of her classmates made fun of her. And maybe not all, but some of the classmates made fun of her. And she remembers this so vividly because what they were saying was that she was pathetic. She was so pathetic because she brought the soda cracker. And so this stays there in the subconscious, and she's so afraid of being pathetic. So you see how subtle it is. It's these little traumatic situations where we're on the spotlight, literally, and something happens, and we no longer know if we're in this safe situation or not, right? And so this is a kindergarten system, and this is one example that really caught my attention, and I'm sure that all of us have our different situations from kindergarten, and of course the social system, which links to the collective subconscious. And the collective subconscious is what Carl Jung writes a lot about, the collective subconscious, because it's this mind field that we are all a part of, whether we are aware of it or not. It is this mind field that is collective, that doesn't usually get spoken about. We just take it for granted. We just take it as what it is. I read this very funny meme. Actually, it was on Twitter. It was a tweet. And it was this guy who owns a restaurant, and he was saying that he will never forget this moment when this man comes into the restaurant without a mask, and he's like, "Can somebody please tell me what is going on?" And so they have to give this man a mask and explain to him that we're in the middle of a global pandemic. This man lived at the top of the mountain off grid, and for those last 2 years, he was farming happy in his farm, and he never realized that there was a global pandemic. And so that collective knowing, like, we are all in agreement right now that we are in a global pandemic. Even the guy who does the cual pandemia thing, he's talking about it. He knows there's a pandemic. He's just going against it, right? So there is this thing that we know that is happening. And so the collective subconscious will be based on our culture, our class, and our epoch. And the media, the media, I was gonna say news, but I don't know if people watch the news, but sponsored ads basically put the dominance of what we should be thinking about. Master signifiers, as I explained yesterday, is this master signifier is this fancy word in psychoanalysis for what we think about. So in the collective subconscious, there are fantasies that dictate what we should be thinking about as citizens, as workers, as members of a collective. So usually it's like what matters and what success is. And money is currently a master signifier in our capitalistic culture. Money is energy, and there's nothing wrong with money. But this idea that we constantly have to have money and what status is, and I have an example with this that I wanted to share with you. I haven't shared this example in a while, and last year, when I was living at Blue Spirit, I had this calling to do one-on-one retreats. So I had this beautiful house up in the hill, and I was going to facilitate space with meditations and sound healing and healing foods and yoga and whatnot, the tools that I offer, and have people come into the house, stay with me, and do this healing journey. And I had to get some things for the house because I didn't have everything for the retreats to begin. And I live half of the time now in San Jose and half of the time in Nosara. At the time, I was living full time in Nosara, and I rarely came to San Jose, especially because we were at the peak of the pandemic. And we have one main supermarket, which is like Pali. And so it's very basic. And I really needed good cutlery, good forks, knives, and spoons. And I couldn't find nice cutlery. And I was going to have people in the house who were going to be eating these beautiful meals with healing ingredients. And it was going to be this my desire was for people to experience beauty in every moment, to experience what initially sprouted as like I want spiritual beauty, right? So the nature that is in Blue Spirit and the food that I cook and the way that they're, right? So that was the beauty was the signifier. And then I got caught up on the cutlery because they were like plastic or not very nice cutlery. So I spent a lot of time in the website of Crate and Barrel looking for cutlery, and it was expensive. And I was gonna spend money in the cutlery until my husband, because he's very mindful with money, he was like, "You can buy whatever you want, but do you realize that you have spent like 3 days talking about cutlery and how people need to have the finest cutlery, and you totally forgot they came for healing? Like, you're not selling luxury, what you're selling is an experience of peace. Like, why did you disconnect from that?" And I was like, oh my God, you're so right. That is the collective subconscious of like, we start with this archetype, and I'm going to get into the archetypals and the archetypes just in a moment, but we start with this idea of something that feels nourishing for us, and then we go into these threads that get kind of like interfered by these collective patterns. And it doesn't mean that it's not okay to have the nice things. Like, obviously beauty expresses itself in every form, and at the end I got nice cutlery, but I remembered, right? You see what I mean? Like, sometimes we don't remember and we forget to link it. And then if my husband wouldn't have said that, I would probably be so obsessed looking at this person having the meal and do they like the cutlery or not, because I was so obsessed with it. You know, I forgot. And so this guides me into our archetypal subconscious. So when I was giving this example of the retreat, I was talking about beauty, right? I wanted people to have an experience of beauty. Beauty is, and beauty, I don't know if beauty necessarily is an archetype, but the energy of beauty is a reference that we can all relate to. Beauty. It's a principle of life. And these archetypes are mythological patterns or ideas. They're primordial, that sprout from consciousness, sprout from God. And archetypes want to incarnate through us and through the things that we do and reveal that, right? So we, as beings in this world that are endowed with the gift of consciousness and with awareness, we are vessels for things to come through. You know, every artist that is authentic will say that sometimes, like, the painting just came through, or the music just came through, or the way that they listened to this tune allowed them to create this symphony, right? There's this inspiration that flows through us. Usually when we create something beautiful is when we get out of the way and just allow for things to express. And so these archetypes allow, invite us to take this position of like a heroic journey. So Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung did a lot of work with this. They did a great service for us in humanity because they reminded us that we enter our archetypal journey when we stop being victims from our circumstances, from our scenarios, but rather we take empowerment for what we are. And I forgot, I don't know if you were doing this with me, but collective, archetypal. So it's very buried, right? It's buried beneath this other layers. And archetypes also get distorted by capitalism. And again, capitalism is just a structure and a construct. It's nothing wrong, but I will tell you how it distorts archetypes. I often tell this story of, and this story is very generic, but I think it serves purpose in helping us see how it plays out in our own lives, okay? So I gave the example of the cutlery, which mixes the collective subconscious with the archetypal subconscious. An example that I often give is, let's say that you were born with the blueprint or the energy, the archetypal energy, the calling to be a healer, to bring wholeness, to bring restoration, to bring healing. And it's what you're bringing forth in your life. And as you grow into adulthood, you very quickly learn that healers are doctors. So you go to medical school. And in medical school, you learn all about the human body and you learn all about contemporary medicine, right? Usually in hospitals and in medical practice, your classmates are smoking tobacco outside and people get drunk and sleep with each other. And this is just the energetics of medical school, as of any school. But for the purposes of this conversation, you still want to help people. You still want to bring healing. You fall into not so healthy eating patterns and you develop your own conditions yourself. And by the time that you are ready to be of service and you graduate from medical school, most likely you will make the most money if you recommend pharmaceuticals to other people. And that's how you will make a living. And so you are a doctor and you are providing people with a component of health. But in our system, usually that's just a band-aid and it won't address the deeper root causes, right? And so that's mostly what Western medicine is. And this is a whole discussion in itself because I belong to this world. I studied nutrition and it is important to have those band-aids and it is important to address those things, right? Like if I break my leg, I would like, somebody that knows how to work with bones to put it together. I don't want the Reiki healer if I break my leg, right? Maybe later I will have Reiki. There is a necessity for the type of medicine that we have, as there was a necessity for me to have cutlery. But where is that disconnect between that thread, right? Can we follow that archetypal journey? And it's the same with every profession. There is this purity and this desire to express something. And if we slowly let it die, really, there will be a disconnect. So for instance, like I love the ancient world architecture, or even just seeing mosques, for instance, or like seeing the beauty of cathedrals and churches of the old world. And it was in service for many. It wasn't just for the king or the queen, right? And nowadays, like beautiful architecture is basically reserved for people who have the means to pay for it. And that's great. But there is a disconnect between service and between the wholeness of who we are as a society. And so with this module and with understanding what our role is, my desire is that we begin to understand, first of all, that we are the ones creating these roles, and second of all, we are a society. Like, it's not like society is this thing out here. Like, I am a part and a member of society, and the clearer I get with my archetypal role, the clearer I get with what I love, the clearer I get with what brings me joy, the more I will be able to show up in the world with this vibration, and the world will respond to that, right? So it is a work that we have to do because it's not really supported by society, but we can create a system where that can happen. And it can simply be with the way that we listen to a friend and how she's expressing or he's expressing his passion for something, or the way that we deliver our work and with how much attention and mindfulness we can do that. The way we take advice from others, I think it's a very mindful moment by moment situation. Am I resonating at this archetypal level? How closer can I get to that vibration? So we take these professions, a doctor, a musician, an architect, a blue collar label, people, label, labor, people who are fixing our water systems, people who are building our water systems, people who build roads, like literally people who hold the structure of society together. Like, how would it look like if we supported each other in the creation of sacredness, if we brought sacredness to everything that we do? And this doesn't mean that there has to be a meditation at the beginning of a plumber coming and fixing something, right? It's with how much sacredness we put into moment by moment. A question that gets asked a lot is, okay, so how do I find this archetypal role? It's not something that needs to be like looked for outside. It's something that we need to uproot from within and rise with it. And we often don't have to look very far. It's like, what am I resisting? What am I afraid of? Can I go beyond it? That activates that heroic heart, right? Courage, you may know this already. The word courage, the etymology of this word. So the origin of the word comes from the French cœur, which means heart. And so there is a relationship between having the courage and having the heart to do something. And when we have the heart to do something, we usually, it's not selfish. It is in the service of other, even though it brings us joy personally. There's a calling when we activate this courage, this calling to adventure, this capacity to say yes to something that before maybe we wanted to do, but we really didn't know how. And this call to adventure is a call to restructure the way that we see ourselves and the way that we see the world. The call to adventure invites us to the art of living, right? What is true philosophy? What is it for? What is healing? What is music? We are defining this consistently. What is law, math, poetry? So we all have, whether we know it or not, whether we have activated or not, it is there because we are children of God. We are expressions of God. So we need to listen attentively. And the question is, what is it that I want? What are the deepest yearnings of our heart? I will leave you along with this presentation, these resources, if this is a subject that interests you, to go deeper. I want you to read this quote by Joseph Campbell. He did a great work in the development of archetypes. So take a moment to read it. This quote to me never gets old. It clarifies, the quote clarifies that we don't have to look somewhere very far away. You know, if we feel like there's a blockage, if we feel like doors are closed and we follow that bliss, doors will open where we thought that they couldn't. If you do follow your bliss, you put yourself on a kind of track that has been there all the while, waiting for you. And the life that you ought to be living is the one that you are living. So it's right now, what is happening right now. Follow your bliss and don't be afraid. And doors will open where you didn't know they were going to be. So these places where we think it's just a wall, a portal can open into a place deeper. And so, you know, joy is bliss. This following our bliss, following that which brings us this deep state of being, is something that goes beyond an activity or goes beyond a situation. Joy, bliss is a state of being. So usually it doesn't need something concrete. It is how we are resonating, how we are vibrating. So let's find what is it that we love? What is it that brings us joy to that state? And like Mary Oliver says, this joy is what will show us what we want to do with our wild and precious life. In order to do that, Joseph Campbell says that we must be willing to let go of the life we planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. I can't tell you how I thought my life would be 2 years ago when I left the ashram. It does not look like what I have right now. Can't tell you. But it is what it is. And so good luck, bad luck, who knows? It's what it is. The more I let go of it, the more cool it gets and the more interesting it gets. Sanskaras. Sanskaras are a very subtle layer of our being. And I include sanskaras because even though it is beyond my field of work, I know that it exists. Sanskaras are these deep-rooted tendencies that we bring from prior life experiences, and the word sanskara is in reference to another life. So it gets into reincarnation, and whether you think reincarnation is possible or not, whether it is something that you think about or not, think about it as this deep-rooted tendencies that is very difficult to let go of. So we don't have to necessarily think about reincarnation. Like we can say like you just can't stop having love affairs. You just can't stop. That's the one example that I'm having in my mind right now. Or you feel this connection to someone that you've never met before, and there's this like total recognition. That can be this prior life experience that you're bringing into this life. And so samskaras, recognizing sanskaras like, oh my God, I don't know why, but I always have this feeling. Or it can be like, I don't know why, but I always wanted to live in this place and now I'm here. Or for me, when a way that I see sanskaras is I grew up in a very Catholic family. And so there wasn't really reference to any other religion. It was Catholicism. That's the world that I knew. And when I was 11, my mom took me to one of her friends' yoga classes. It was in Krama Yoga. And it was like a special class. So there were some mantras, like not New Age, but Indian chants, formal Indian chants. And there was incense. And when we got there, there was a yoga class first, a meditation. When we sat to meditate, I just had this feeling of being home. And it was so weird because I didn't know what was happening, but there was this like deep sense of like, I belong in here. And I would say that that's a deep rooted tendency of somewhere of a past experience. I don't think about that too much at all, but I know, or like, I for sure know that in some, I feel related to monastic life. I'm no longer in it, but I feel deeply connected to it. Like when I read texts of the way nuns were thinking, I could understand. Um, that's my personal experience with sanskars, like this unexplainable situations where we feel like there's a recognition. And then the final layer that structures our being, and I always, for the last months that I've been teaching this, there's all these layers in this separate self, right, that are creating the illusion of separateness and stacking one upon the other. And the Atman, our real self, is not necessarily this layer here. There's not a line. I see more and more the Atman as what's beneath all of these layers. You know, so it's not something that necessarily, boom, it's a structure. It is always there. It is always present, no matter what. No matter if we think about it, if we acknowledge it or not. That essence of being, that peace, that knowing, that love is always there, underlying and influencing our experience. So back to the farmer's story. What is it that is? That is the underlying thread. And so even though we always have, you know, it's always there, we usually experience this when we have a sense of deep peace, when we have a sense of calmness and we know that all is well. And through grace, these moments where we least expect it and we all of a sudden feel a shower of love, right? And before we go into our break, another story, not a bedtime story, but another story. This story, I think, speaks about whether we recognize the Atman or not. And it takes place in a kingdom where this king who inherited the kingdom never got married, didn't have children, and there's no one he can inherit the throne to. He didn't have brothers, sisters. There's no one to pass the lineage along, right? So he is in his final years. He's done his job and he's done it well, and people are happy, and the kingdom is stable. And yet he knows that he won't be sharp in his mind to be able to carry on the kingdom to a prosperous new years. And so he decides that instead of him choosing someone random or like saying, I will give my kingdom to this person, he will be doing a very democratic process. So he sends out all of these flyers through Instagram, and people get it. Like, if you want to be king, this is your opportunity. Show up on the palace this Friday at 7 p.m. for a gala and a dinner, and we will all have the same opportunity to be king or queen. And so everybody knows that there is going to be this possibility of becoming king, and a lot of people are interested in it. Of course, like being king, that sounds so awesome. So all of these people that are interested go to the palace on the date that the celebration is going to happen, and they're going to have a choosing of who could be king, basically like a job interview. So everybody comes to the job interview, and the king really wanted to make this a fair process. So he says, you know, instead of having people feel like some of them are more capable or less capable, or some of them have more of a chance to getting the role than others, or they think that it's going to be something to do with money, like who has more money and who has less money, let's make everybody feel like they're on the same level. So the moment that you got into the palace, you would get dressed with very nice clothes, and there also was a banquet for people to eat and be fed and be, some people are hungry and everybody needs to feel like they are on the same plane. And so there's a dinner and it gets loud, people are talking and they're saying like, look at how beautiful her dress, look at his dress, like complimenting each other and then criticizing each other. And there's this like very intense environment of people excited to be there. They're getting good food, they're getting all this amazing jewelry, and it's quite an interesting experience. And all of a sudden, amongst all of this noise, the king and his minister are waiting for people to start showing up and having this meeting, right? And so all of a sudden, amongst all of this noise, it gets really quiet. And so the king tells his minister, maybe they're ready to come in. Let's have them in. Go and check on them. So the minister goes down and he comes into the banquet, and he returns to the king, and he's quite sad. And he tells the king, my lord, they have all left. There's no one there. They were all dressed and fed. They weren't thirsty anymore. They weren't hungry anymore. They were tired. So they went back home. And I think this story speaks about this life that we are being called to live. And we get all of what we think this experience might be, right? And this metaphor and this example, we get all the clothing and all the jewels and all the good food. And why were we there in the first place? Was it not because we were interested in this role of being king? We forget. And so I will invite you to go on a break. Maybe you can reflect on this. And we will come back in, let's do 10 minutes. So we will come back at 8:40. Let's do 8:40. Okay? See you soon. Okay, welcome again. I want to talk about why unlocking or depotentiating the function of that first primary layer, the function of the sensor, is important. You see, the reason why this is structured in this way, and this is just a graphic in our minds, everything is untraceable, right? It's just logics of our mind. But if we see it graphically, and if we understand that there's an agency within our being that is protecting us from that which seems dangerous, and that which seems dangerous was formed when we were very, very young, so before 5 years old. So obviously what appeared to be dangerous to us when we were 3, for an adult, it won't be the case. And so if I want to very much be in touch with my sanskars, with my collective subconscious, and I think the archetypal subconscious is very interesting to many of us, there needs to be a breaking through these initial layers. There needs to be, if I had an eraser, like there needs to be an opening that happens in the mind so that I can access these deeper layers of my being. Why? Because the power to all of these drives, the power to break through those self limitations, is beneath the sensor. So there needs to be a working with the sensor and depotentiating in the sense of like learning how to work and take the power from the sensor and give it back to the self, basically. It's not like the sensor is separate from ourselves. It's not like this separate entity. It's an agency within the mind that holds the power of what we are allowed to know and what we aren't allowed to know. And when we begin to work into the sensor and open space there, we begin to give power back to us, to the self, self with a capital S. We begin to end self-sabotage with clarity and mindfulness. We begin to cultivate compassion for ourselves and for the other. Sometimes when we feel very blurry and it's difficult for us to remember very little things to very major things, but sometimes when we are distracted, it's an action of the sensor. And so when we begin to open space in our minds, there is a gift of clarity. And I think in this day and age, we take clarity for granted when it is such a precious gift. I mean, there's nothing I can't in my hierarchy of needs and in my hierarchy of desires. There's nothing that I value more than being clear-minded and knowing what I want and knowing how I want to live my life, right? So the gift of clarity and the gift of being able to focus, takes focus to create what we want. It takes focus to be able to conceive of something. And focus doesn't mean like something arduous and difficult. It just takes that attention, right? And to direct our willpower. And this is how I opened the workshop yesterday. Of many times we have the desire to do something, and yet we can't really see it through because we're so clogged in our minds. We're so distracted. There's so many tabs open that it's difficult to direct willpower. And so when we look at this, there's a lot of suffering in our world and the way that these patterns structure us. But the suffering is really a call to investigate what is truly going on inside of us. And the idea of this retreat as Gyana Yoga, self knowledge, is inspired by this yogic vow, monastic yogic vow that is not reserved only to monastic living. It's Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya is a Sanskrit word that stands for self-study. Actually, not self-study, study. So we study what is going on inside of us, and we study with these frameworks that seem to give some sort of meaning, these maps. We begin to trace a map of understanding. And so I talk about inner work as a path of purification. And by purification, I don't mean that there needs to be like that something is flawed or that something is wrong. Purification, when I speak of purification, I mean this lightheartedness that we can access when we look at our problems, or when we look at those things that we're ashamed of, or when we look at those things that we haven't made peace with, and we suddenly make peace with them. Because the more self-knowledge we can have, the more power we have in order to make executive decisions. And so I have some questions regarding this information before we jump into the next module. I'm going to read the questions aloud, and I want you to don't write the question, write the answer. And then I will send these to you, and you can, if you find interest in one of those questions, or if you were journaling and you felt like there was a lot of information that was coming up, then you can return to it. You'll get the questions. So write if this makes sense to you. Does any of this make sense to you? Are there some subjects easier to digest, easier to explore? Are there some themes that are less pleasant to explore? We found that there was some resistance. and looking at your life right now without thinking of where you are going or what is about to happen in your life, do you feel right now that there's some of these layers that are playing a part or are playing a role? Is there some fear or inhibition because of one of these layers? Is there a structuring layer that is more awake, that is more active? Which layers I can't even think about, which layers I am censoring. What does self-sabotage mean to you? And I want you to think of today. And if you can't find something today, then we can look at the last days. Are you able to identify a recent event in which you have chosen to stay small or chosen to enlarge yourself in a way that wasn't really reasonable due to unconscious forces? What happens with this question, maybe this can give a little bit more of clarity. The ego has two main functions, or operating modes, really. Operating modes. We have, and just as the eight worldly dharmas, pleasure, pain, gain, loss, we have a drive for superiority and we have a drive for inferiority. And they're always protecting each other, or they're always working with each other. In IFS, internal family systems therapy, it's like one part is protecting the other. And so a superiority complex is when we think of ourselves super, super high and in a way that is not really rooted with reality. And an inferiority complex is when we serruchar el piso, when we like bring us down to an extent that it's completely irrational. And we're always oscillating in different situations between these two unless we are able to be authentic. So there's situations that I find myself, I will play a superiority complex, and then I was really not present, and therefore I couldn't really open my heart to what the situation required. And then there's other times in which I am so afraid of being vulnerable that I play small and that I don't want to deal with it. And so it is in daily life that we see how we interact and how possible it would be for, or how common it is that we defend our vulnerability between these two. So maybe write if this makes sense to you, like if you find that you do this sometimes, and if you do it with people regularly, if there's a relationship you have in your life that you constantly play this game with. And then moving on with the questions, do you know what you're afraid of? And this fear that you have you been afraid of it before, but nothing happened? Forgot to share this. What comes to your mind when we speak of truth and your own truth? What does that mean to you? What is your own truth? Do you know how to find it? Which strategies do you use to be in homeostasis? I think that's an ambiguous question. To which recurrent activities do you turn to numb yourself? That's another way of speaking of homeostasis. What do you do to like numb yourself? Doesn't mean balance yourself. Numb yourself. Scrolling on Instagram, smoking, gossiping. And then, are you able to note when you disconnect from your center? Sometimes it takes time to note. And how does it feel when you are disconnected from your heart mind, when you're disconnected from your center? Because that's usually when we feel lack, when we feel that emptiness inside. And then feeling that, how does it feel when you are connected to your heart? How does it feel when you are aligned with your heart and your mind intelligence? Can you see how the personal fantasies and opinions of others have shaped your decisions? So if somebody said that you were good at something, you believed it and you did it, or somebody said that you weren't good at something, you believed it and you didn't, or that you didn't look good in certain clothes, or that you looked good in certain clothes, or that you were a great public speaker, or you were a terrible public speaker, or that you were pathetic because you brought soda crackers to the lunch meal. And then can I see what are the collective beliefs that I have used to navigate reality? Can I see how fantasies and projections limit your potential? Can you see how fantasies and projections limit your potential? And your ability to access the magic of the present moment. So, how our perceptions based on constructions of reality limit you from seeing what is already here. Do you feel in touch with your archetypical patterns? And remember, you don't have to look very far away. It can be the tenderness of mothering, or the joy that you feel when you dance, or when you feel in touch with what is real to you, when you write poetry, when you journal, when you listen. And thinking about this, how could you find more connection? And this is an open question. How can you connect more with that? And remember, it's not so much doing stuff or buying things, it's a state of being. And so, based on that it is a state of being, I'm going to ask you another question. The question is, what is your body saying no to? And I want you to listen to your body and see what it says. What is your body saying no to? And what does your body need in order to heal? Ask. Ask and listen. What do you need in order to heal? What brings you joy? Very talented writer, Mary Oliver, writes in the Summer Days poem at the end, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And I want to read this other poem that I found very appropriate. I'm going to share. You can listen or read along. You can listen as a meditation. You can read along. It's also from Mary Oliver, and it's called The Journey. And listen and imagine what might this look like for you. One day, you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble, and you felt the old tug at your ankles, mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers and the very foundations, at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough in the wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voice behind, as stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life that you could save. So tell me, what will you do with your wild, precious life? There is this um, phrase that I have been using for some time now. It's called the lotus logic. And it's inspired in a poem somebody once wrote to me when I was going through a very dense time and I couldn't really see light at the end of the tunnel. And the poem is called Lotus Logic. And it was written by one of the monks at the ashram. And um, a lotus, a lotus flower, has this very interesting logic to it. A lotus flower is born out of a muck. So a muck is this very dirty, usually full of shit environment. And the lotus begins to grow looking for sunlight. And so it grows through this very dense environment looking for sunlight until it finds it. And when it comes out of it and it begins to bloom and open, there's no one speck of dust of dirtiness in it. It's very clean and beautiful, but it is still connected to that shit. And so I want to share with you I want to basically open the toolbox that I have so that we can get curious about what the logic of our lotus flower is. And some lotus flowers think that they are floating in rose water, and some lotus flowers know that they're in shit. And at the end, we may shift from environment to environment. But in a time where we want to bloom, I find these tools help me, and so I want to share with you. So basic toolbox is meditation, and I will expand a little bit on this. When it's difficult to meditate, then we can journal, we can go to therapy, and we can learn to listen to that voice that Mary Oliver is talking about in her poem. You know, there's all of these voices going on that are shouting and asking for something. And there's this one voice that when we begin to listen, it's guiding us to where we are meant to go. We can bring awareness to karma. This is another way of speaking of mindfulness. You know, what is happening? Don't let it just happen. Take it in. It doesn't mean that you have to think about it too much, but think about it. Like, oh, I crashed my car. Maybe I wasn't driving mindfully. Maybe I was thinking about something else. Maybe I was angry at this person. Maybe at that moment I had disconnected myself. Or maybe something else was happening, or something breaks. It doesn't mean that you have to create a story around it. And you certainly don't have to overthink it, but think honestly. Think honestly. Self-care as part of the toolbox. And self-care is a spectrum. Sometimes it requires somebody else to help us do something, like a massage, for instance. But the self-care that I'm talking about is to our real self. So how do we care for our real self? And I'll get into this too. And then there is this very interesting thing that I'm exploring that is called as is. Awareness of sensation through internal scanning. ASEIS. As is. It's easy to remember. And it's bringing awareness of our sensations through an internal scanning. So let's say there's a conversation, and all of a sudden I feel like I'm being abandoned. And I can notice inside, bring awareness to what is happening inside, and practice that as is. And as is very interesting because it's like the farmer's story. Like, oh, I feel like I'm growing little, or I feel like I can't breathe properly, or like I get joy and all of a sudden I feel expanded and happy and everything feels alive. Pay attention to what is happening inside in your body, in your physical body, because that will guide you deeper to your energetic body, to your mind body. There is this little thing we all have called our inner compass. It is this intuition. We all have an intuition. Some intuitions are dusty and left away, and some intuitions are very active and alert and alive and functioning, and they even have a GPS and all these amazing tools, and I'm talking seriously. So how do we access our inner compass? A year ago, I would have written 20 pages and a dissertation thesis on how to access your inner compass. Right now, my suggestion is just feel, like feel honestly. What is happening? Feel. Allow yourself to feel. Don't run away. Really allow yourself to feel. And then listen to what is happening. Listen to what you're feeling. Don't neglect it. Pay attention. And then breathe into it. Learn to sit with it. Don't run away from it. Nourish it, nurture it. And know that from this very simple practices of presence, we can access this intuition that we all have. Sometimes we like to make it very complicated. Then there's some pointers I have to nourish our heart, nourish our inner being. So in this day and age, I don't think this is like the self-care part of it that I was saying. So, I mean, take some time off your phone and of electronics and of responsibilities and just be. And don't think about this in quantity, but think about it in quality. Like, okay, I have 5 minutes here. The doctor is late. I'm waiting in the waiting room. Instead of scrolling, let me read that article that I was interested in that spoke about mind-body connection. Or like, I'm just gonna sit and breathe. Or journal. Or go take a loop walk. Your kid is early from school and you have a little moment, like spend some time with them. So take some time away from your phone. Sometimes I like to say like I'll spend this whole week without my phone, and it usually doesn't happen because I have clients and what else. So instead of thinking of this whole retreat, I think about like a little moment here and there. What I've started to do, and I don't know if you have the luxury of doing this, but when my phone's battery is running out, let's say it's in 10%, I will charge it and turn it off and then come back to it when it's fully charged. Then lay flat on the ground or walk in nature. And if you live in a in residencial, it would be really funny if you're just like laying on the ground and the neighbors walk by. I mean, connect with nature, whatever way that works for you. Breathe deeply. This breath of breathing deeply and focus on slowing down your exhalations. The exhale has a lot of power. Sometimes when we are told to breathe deeply, we're like, and we totally forget to fully exhale. Take time to enjoy your baths. This is key. Sometimes we're in a rush, and I have two scenarios. Like, let's say we want more self-care in our lives. We feel like we've let ourselves a little bit to the side. And so we plan self-care as this great thing, something that we have to save money for or something. But I have these two scenarios. You wake up late, the alarm goes off, it's already late, you get out of bed, you rush through the shower, basically just like armpits and bum, and then you put whatever you find in the closet and go to work. It feels like it's rushed, it's disconnected, there's always like, maybe there's even a self-attack that we didn't have time to do it, versus getting up at the time that we said and enjoying the shower, really enjoying it, really using that moment to shower with this gift of water, to clean yourself, to receive this cleansing effect that water has, and then coming out of the shower, picking the clothes that you like and wearing them and feeling beautiful and in your own body. And you even have time to have breakfast instead of like just having a coffee in the car. And these are things that you don't really have to pay more. Like, it's just a matter of like wanting to connect. Bring beauty into your life, appreciate beauty. So buy those, cut those knives and forks at Crate and Barrel. I'm just kidding. Get some flowers, shift the furniture around, feel comfortable in your own spaces. Appreciate beauty. Take time to appreciate beauty. Lately, I've been finding that I take beauty for granted. Like, I'll be like, oh, that's a nice flower. I'm like, wait. Oh my God, that's such a beautiful flower. Like, it's just, we take it for granted. It was happening to me in Osara those last weeks I was there. I'm going back next week for a teacher training. But the last week, something very intense had happened, and I felt my heart was closing, and so I was looking at the ocean, and I knew, I knew, like, that witness consciousness, I knew that I wasn't taking it in, and it was so interesting because I could see how I was blocking myself from fully absorbing the magnificence that the ocean is. And having that awareness that was happening, it wasn't like I was like, bullshit, this sucks. But I couldn't really like take it in. But the witness consciousness was active enough to say, like, you're shutting down. And then that in itself created a more open heart. Does that make sense? Because I'm not preaching, and please, I want to make this clear. Like, I'm not saying like, oh my God, such a beautiful morning. Good morning, dear husband. How are you? You look so handsome today. Don't I look pretty? Like, it's not this like response to life, right? Like living from the heart. It's just being very honest with what is happening, and learning to speak vulnerably, powerfully with our own voice, and then move our body. I am a yoga educator, so for me, yoga is very potent, but I recognize the power of simply getting in our body. It doesn't matter what it is, learning to follow those rhythms of the body. As we go into our bedtime, I want to invite you to, before you go to sleep, I want you to have your journal next to your bed, and I want you to ask for guidance in your dreams. Very simple. So you close your eyes, and I want you to say, I want to remember my dream, and I want this dream to show me what I need to know. Very simple. You can make your own prayer. And then when you wake up, see if you remember something of the dream. It doesn't have to be the whole story, or though sometimes it may be. If there was a particular person there, or a situation, or a place, see if you can remember and write it down. If you don't have time to write the whole thing down, maybe just write a couple of things. Our dreams are, Carl Jung used to speak about dreams as these letters that the universe, the universal intelligence, that God is writing to us, and that when we don't open a dream, is like we are not opening a letter that the universe wrote to us. So archetypes communicate through our dreams. And at first, you may notice that there's a lot of chaos in dreams, or things don't make sense. But the more that you pay attention and the more that you remember, it's fascinating. You will start seeing patterns. You will start seeing repetitive ideas. And when that idea gets resolved, or you can integrate it into your life, something new will come in. So get curious about what your dreams are telling you. Dreams can also provide that access to our inner compass, to our intuition, and to what is in our dream world. And it's coming to mind now, so I can share a little bit of this so that you see how it can speak. We have time. Yeah, we have time. So it was my 500-hour yoga teacher training in Osaka, and I had booked a hotel because it was it was in a reasonable price, and I wanted to have some time to myself. So if I stayed at the institute, I would have to be with all these people consistently. And so I wanted to have some me time, basically. And so this hotel is owned by somebody that I know, and so they gave me a good deal on the price. And when I arrived, I was invited to lunch, and so I had lunch. Lunch was delicious, and then it is the day of the teacher training, so I go get ready, and I feel a little bit scattered in my mind, and I can't really quite point out what is happening. And I make my way to the teacher training, and I'm beginning to feel like imbalanced, like anxious. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm anxious because it's my 500-hour teacher training, and I'm teaching, and there's a lot of people, and they're all very professional in yoga, and they're all very experienced. And all of a sudden, I really, really begin to feel unbalanced, like another layer. And it's like total deregulation. It's my time to speak. I have to give this really tiny introduction, and I can't speak. Like, I can't connect with language. And I'm like, oh my God, like inside of me, witness consciousness is like, you're having a psychotic breakdown, sweetie. Like, I can't really connect two and two together, but I am aware that this is happening. And I'm like, this feels like an acid trip. Like, I feel like I'm tripping balls, like I'm fucking high. And I feel really confused because this is not how I operate. I don't do drugs. It just begins to feel very weird. And so I feel so traumatized, like so unable to connect, and this is my job. That I'm like, I'm gonna go to the hotel and like get my book of Ramana Maharshi and read about how the ego is dying, and like God is coming through, because I can't really make sense of my experience. And so thankfully nothing happened. Like, I got in my car and I drove like 10 miles an hour. And I get to the hotel room, I shower, and I'm in bed like, oh my God, this is so weird. Like, I just can't really understand what is happening in my mind. And I get this message from the owner of the hotel, like, hey, I forgot to tell you, but we put some drugs in the potatoes. I can't explain to you the level of like confusion and betrayal that I felt. I literally felt that I was raped because these people put drugs in my food and they didn't tell me. And I have a very tender consciousness. I don't do drugs because of that reason. I'm very sensitive. I literally went crazy. And if it wasn't because of my meditation practice and because of my support systems and because I have a strong spiritual practice, like I still feel the effects of that, and I'm working very like diligently in not like losing my trust in the other, because like if somebody invites me to eat, I'm like, ee! Right? And so the reason I'm telling you this whole story is to tell you that after that night, for the next 3 days, I had already paid the hotel for that month. After this 3 days, the next 3 days, I was having these dreams of men trying to rape me. It was like nightmares. And what I began to realize is that I felt I had been raped, like somebody had literally entered my body without my permission and put something there that I didn't want. And so these dreams were telling me something that I couldn't face because I knew these people and I didn't know how to confront them. And I didn't know how to tell them like, hey, like, what the fuck? Like, you don't do that, right? I didn't know how to express anger. I didn't know how to express even like, hey, what you did is wrong. Like, you just don't do that to people. Like, you can sue them if like these things are illegal, right? Like, you just don't go around and give people drugs. And so with these dreams, what I realized is, number one, I don't want to stay here anymore. I feel like my trust has been broken. Number two, what I am feeling has a reason to be. And number three, I need to communicate this. And so I used those dreams as fuel to inform my reality, something that I was trying to push away and like just forget it. Like, it doesn't matter, it was just drugs. So it really impacted me. It doesn't matter if it doesn't impact them, but it really impacted me. And so dreams, even though it was a nightmare, even though it wasn't like, oh, this is such a beautiful dream, I'm regaining my power. No, it's like men trying to rape me. But there is a reality in that nightmare. And what seems so haunting in the nightmares actually is something really powerful for our souls. Does that make sense? Like, it may seem like something is and I wanted to tell it as raw as it is, because some dreams may seem to not make sense, but the more that we explore it, there's some messages there to regain power. And there's also many beautiful dreams that reminds us of the beauty that it is to be alive. With meditation as a self-care practice, sometimes when we begin a more consistent meditation practice, we might feel like it's uncomfortable or we just don't have the time. And my recommendation is just keep showing up, because when we are able to sit with those uncomfortabilities and breathe to it. So again, feel, listen, breathe, something magical opens up. That's the lotus logic. Pay attention to our karma. So events that deliberately force you to pause, I think that's karma. Like, something happens and it invites me to pause and reflect and choose what my state of consciousness will be. And with that, events that drug event was also a karmic event, and it was an invitation for me to pause and choose how I wanted to reflect with it, rather than be like, a victim, even though I was a victim of the situation because I didn't want that to happen. It happened. And so how do I want to relate with it? And at the end of the day, it invites for forgiveness, because literally in their minds, they were trying to give me a good experience. It doesn't mean that what they did was right. And it doesn't mean that I will do it to somebody else. And I certainly won't allow for it to happen again in the best of my ability. But I've forgiven. Like, it's not like I want to be best friends with them anymore. But through forgiveness, I learned to speak my truth. I told them what I thought, and they could see. Sometimes people can't see. And so the reason why we go through this whole structuring layers of the self is because we need to realize that that egoic identification is the root of suffering. And when we talk about spirituality and our spiritual life, it doesn't necessarily mean living from higher states of consciousness where all is love and light. Even though glimpses of that are very, very helpful, and I feel like they fuel us. It's like we are fueling our heart. But when we learn to sit with what is in our minds and feel and breathe and listen, that rightness can be sustained. That spiritual rightness can be sustained. So before we go, 9:30, I'm going to give you a homework. So I want to talk about one-on-one sessions. I feel like this workshop is a lot and we are not even done. We still have tomorrow to go through. And so I've never really done it like this, but I wanted to open a space for you to ask your questions or just talk about something that you may like, or just have a guided meditation, whatever you want. But I feel like it's helpful to have that follow-up. I want you as homework to observe your nervous system and see if there's a moment for rest and repair and play. I want you to watch this movie called Finding Joe. It's on YouTube, it's free. But we will leave this homework for the weekend so that you don't like have to watch the movie at work or something. And then I want you to read to yourself aloud, not right now, but maybe tomorrow, the answers to the questions that you were writing. And because we didn't write the question, only the answer, I want you to see what that tells you. Read it from witness consciousness. I will still upload this so that you have the questions if you want to review them, but more than intellectualize, it's really what came up in that moment. And that said, I am always surprised. There's so much information to go over. Tomorrow, I want to go over more like concrete examples of how these structuring layers can happen. I want you to have the theory now so that when tomorrow we go into it, you can also begin to see your own examples and how they play in today. And then I want to share with you a meditation tool that's called Rain. It's by Tara Brach, one of my teachers, and I find it very powerful. And then tomorrow also, I want to have plenty of time for us to talk about. So we might even start tomorrow with a Q&A session or an open space session and then go into the material. Okay, 9:32. I hope you have a restful evening. Remember to take your journal to bed. Ask for guidance in your dreams. And this is a very good time to do this work because we have a new moon eclipse happening, which it's just a very beautiful time to go inside. I hope you have a good restful sleep. Namaste.